Hi everyone, it's Jody and welcome back to my channel, The Planner Pages Edit. Today I'm going to be looking back on 2025, examining how my planning system evolved since January until now. I'm going to share with you all the things that worked well for me this year, what didn't work well, and some of the biggest lessons I learned about myself from this year's planning system. So go ahead and grab a beverage and snack, get settled and comfortable, and let's take a walk down memory lane back to January 2025. So as I was thinking about how to organize this video, my mind, of course, went down a rabbit hole of the many ways I could take you through my 2025 journey. Do I focus on the positive and summarize for you all what worked well for me this year? Or do I risk starting on a negative note by highlighting what didn't work well? In the end, I just decided to start at the beginning and to set the stage for what I was doing in January of this year. I have the three main planners that I was working out of. So in January 2025, I was working out of 3 cloth and paper planners. I was using my half letter for work, my spiral for personal stuff, and the Undated Admin Perfect Bound Notebook for content planning. So now that it's November 25, which of these 3 do you think I am still using? Well, I'll give you a hint. Just this one right now. And again, this is the Undated Admin Perfect Bound Notebook, which I use for content planning. So there's a long story about what happened here, but let's just focus on what of these 3 systems that I started with worked really well for me. And with this cloth and paper Undated Admin Perfect Bound Notebook, which I've been using as my content planner, everything about it just seemed to work well, and it carried me through the entire year. And so let's start with this. So if I were to summarize why this planner stood the test of time, whereas the others did not, I'd sum it up as such: size, simplicity, and functionality. Size, because this, as an A5, is not too big and not too bulky, which is surprising because it fits an entire year of content planning in here. But simplicity, because the page layouts are nothing fancy, just 12 months of undated monthlies. I think I have one more month left that's not filled out. Right, so this is what a blank monthly spread looks like. And then, of course, you've got 52 weeks of weeklies, which looks like this. And that's it in this notebook. And apparently, that was all I needed. So, functionality, for the simple fact that I was able to plan by month and week with plenty of space for notes without overdoing that. If there are no blank pages in this notebook, that's a bonus for me because I get a lot of satisfaction of filling up every page. So I wasn't too overwhelmed with having too many pages for notes. And for me, that when there are too many blank pages, it often results in unused pages or pages full of non-functional filler deco, which isn't necessarily bad because I do get a lot of joy in decorating my pages. But there's just something satisfying about being able to fill every single page with useful stuff. And I am in November, and this is going to be all filled up by the time the year is done. So I'm just going to show you one monthly spread and one weekly spread, and that's all you need to see in order to get a taste of what an entire year in this notebook looks like for me. So this is one of my favorite monthly spreads because it actually shows a little bit of my personality on the pages with all the colors and patterns. And I'll get to the colors and patterns a little later on in this video because I do have a lot to say about that. But basically, what I want to show you is the functionality of these monthly pages. You have a blank calendar. I've shown that. Let me see. I've got one more blank calendar spread. to show you all, and that is here. So this is what it starts off with. You've got this blank calendar, and on the left, I number everything accordingly, right? And then I just use stickers to indicate important dates. And if they are repeating reminders for each week, I'll just use a long page pin to designate that. And then I add the details associated with these dates and reminders right here in the important dates section. And then, of course, there's a checklist for tasks. And this is, again, all related to my content planning. And then things to keep on the radar for next month. And that's it for these monthly layouts. Very simple, but very functional, and still a lot of room for some creative space. Then on the other side, you've got what is a blank graph note page. And again, I filled it up with things that, I wanted to keep in mind for the month. I had some planner thoughts for the month of September. I had some Etsy shop reminders for myself, some YouTube content ideas. I didn't crowd everything in here. I kind of kept it as minimal as possible, and then just added a little bit of flair with some deco, and that was it. So basically, that is just an example of how the entire year looks like from the monthly standpoint. And I've got everything in here starting from January. So do I recommend this notebook? Absolutely 100%. Will I be using this next year? No, but not because I was unhappy with this product. It's because of something that I'm going to discuss later on in this video, and it's really what I learned about myself as a planner in 2025. But, I can do a little flip through here. Again, here's the beginning with the monthly layouts. You can kind of see I started off neutral, and then I got a little more experimental with color and design. And then, of course, these are what the weekly content spreads look like. Here's an example. I started my days on a Sunday, so I just kind of mapped the week out. I had one extra day. I saved this box for to-dos. And then, of course, you've got your tasks for the week. You have a tracker. I use this to track different content, whether it's a reel, a post, a story, etc. And then, of course, just some notes for the week. And that is how it is for the rest of the year. Didn't really change much. The only thing I really changed was the deco, but I was consistent and I used this all the time. But let's move on to my half-letter work planner. So I started the year off using this as my work planner. And this was the second year that I was using cloth and paper inserts in the half-letter size for work. So here's what I love about the half-letter size for work. Because it's a disc system versus this perfect bound notebook, I was able to customize the inserts, the dashboards, a lot of those personalized products that you just are able to do when you use a disc or ring system. So I did like that. I think I really need something for work to keep me motivated, and being able to change and customize my planner is one of those things that just works for me. The other thing that I really like about this is its size. And I like how I have plenty of space for my messy handwriting, my messy notes. One thing that I struggle with when it comes to having a smaller space is making my notes nice and neat, because my handwriting is not neat to begin with. So this size worked really well in terms of just being organized and keeping myself neat and functional, because if it gets messy, I don't use it. So I loved this for work. But I think you're probably all wondering what happened, because I only made it to July on this. And to be quite honest, I kind of stopped using this even before then. I went through the motions of filling it out, but in terms of really using it, that probably petered out around June, so midway through the year. Though I still fill out this fold out annual insert just because it's really fun. But I am not living in this planner currently for work. So why in November am I no longer using my half letter for work? Well, it goes back to one of the things I like about this system, and that's its size. I guess you could say I have a love-hate relationship with the half letter size. I love it because it gives me enough space to keep things organized and neat, but it's such a hard size to travel with, at least for me. I mean, this is pretty thick, and this is not even a full year. This is just 1/4, really. So, unfortunately, I only made it through half the year using this, as much as I loved it, and it was all due to my work travel schedule. So, while I love the spacious, roomy size of the half letter, as I started traveling frequently for work, I just found this to be too heavy and cumbersome. For one thing, it was just a pain to pack, It took up a lot of space in my carry-on. And even if my carry-on has wheels, I just felt like I could be using that space for other stuff. I didn't want a big chunk of that being taken up by my planner, as essential as it is. And here's the thing about work travel for me. It's not like I'm traveling from one office to another. I'm traveling from my home office to the field, meaning I'm running around constantly when I'm on the road. And when I mean running around, I'm putting in an average of about 20,000 steps a day. And I'm doing that while I am carrying my laptop charger, my work planner, my work notebook, pencil case, phone charger, Kindle, a bunch of incidentals like hand wipes, Kleenex, sunscreen, cosmetics, my wallet, and other stuff. It just adds up, and it becomes uncomfortable as I'm running from building to building, often covering a lot of space in a short amount of time. And I am not exaggerating. That is what my work schedule is. So at the end of the day, a half letter planner, as much as I loved it, was literally wearing me down. And so I just decided mid-year, I've got to make a change. And I'll go over that in a bit. But I still love the size. And if I didn't have to travel and move around as much as I do, I would probably still be living in this. But for the current season of my career and life, this just wasn't working. But I know I'll be back in her one day. But for now, she's going to have to wait patiently for her time to come when I can once again use her. And so that leaves us with Cloth and Paper's famous spiral planner. And I have to admit, I have a pretty poor track record with Cloth and Paper's spiral planners. As much as I love them, as beautiful as I find them, I have never been able to make it through a whole year using these planners. So my first spiral planner was 2024, and I only used it for a few months. This year, with a different layout, I thought I'd get a lot more use out of it with its daily list formatting. But again, I didn't make it through the whole year. And that kind of surprised me because I am a list person. But I think one thing I learned about myself when it comes to lists is that most of my lists are living lists. Like, it's not like I have a daily list that I can just tick everything off. Most of my to-do items are long-term, so I'm not going to cross them off every day. Sometimes it'll be the same list week after week, and it'll just take me time to go through it all. So that might have been one reason why this didn't last. But it was my intention to use this as my personal planner for 2025. And I would say I gave it a pretty good try. I think, again, I only lasted half the year in this. So here's a few things I noticed about this year's spiral. I really like to decorate my planners, as you can see, but I really struggled figuring out how to decorate with this list layout. I tried a lot of stuff, and I don't necessarily dislike what I did, but I have to admit I didn't really love what I was doing. But there were a lot of you out there I saw on Instagram were making these incredibly beautiful spreads in these spirals. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't make it work. So there's that, there's the layout of the lists and what the reality of lists are for me as a planner. There was just this layout and me struggling to find a design routine that I really enjoyed. And then, of course, back to my same old beef. It's the size. This is a 1-year planner, so it's thick and it's heavy, right? So when you're running around, just imagine me running around, putting in 20,000 steps a day with this and my laptop and all the other stuff I went through in my backpack. It just got kind of crazy. So I think that probably was another reason why this didn't last as a personal planner, because even with my personal planner, I need something that's portable. And this just was too big for me. And unfortunately, because of that, I think I didn't last the whole year with this. Now, I will say that for 2026, Cloth and Paper will be returning to its traditional spiral layout, which is quite similar to what we've got here in this Perfect Bound notebook, this Undated admin. It's going to be very similar. Not exactly the same, but similar. And so because of that, and because this worked so well for me, my plan is to use my new Cloth and Paper spiral planner as my content planner. And I think it's going to work because of the layout. It's not going to be lists. It's going to be more of a weekly admin spread, but also because I don't need to travel with my content planner. That is something I can use at home, and it can just sit on my desk, and I don't need to carry it with me even when I'm traveling. I can just snap a picture and keep that in my phone of my spread and use that while I'm on the road. So I am optimistic that the 2026 Cloth and Paper Spiral is going to work for me this year, mostly because I've evolved as a planner and because I now know what I like, and they're going to switch things up to really accommodate my content planning. So we'll see. As of the filming of this video, I have not yet received my November Cloth and Paper sub box, which will contain the 2026 Spiral Planner. That is the price you pay when you live out west and Cloth and Paper's out east. But my intention is for me to use the 2026 Spiral as my content planner because of its layout and because I don't really need to travel with it. So I'm going to give it one more try, and let's see if I can make it last the rest of the year. I'm really optimistic that I can. So I'm excited to receive it. So let's move from the first half of 2025 to the second half of the year, which is when things started to change for me. I think the biggest shift in my planner system during the second half of the year was a focus on portability. So while work travel for me began in April, it really picked up in June, and it really didn't slow down until just now, here in mid-November. So as a result, I saw myself moving from these larger planners and notebooks to smaller ones. And I will admit it took some getting used to, but I felt it was a change I needed to implement. So I forced it to work for me. And to my surprise, it did work for me. And I think that biggest change was the move in my work planner from working in a half letter to a personal rings size. Now, I will admit, moving from half letter to personal rings doesn't necessarily guarantee more portability. I mean, honestly, you can fill these ring planners up and stock them up and make them pretty chunky and heavy. And at the end of the day, you're just stuck with the same issue you were before, heavy, bulky planner. So it did take a little more discipline on my side to make sure that when I switched to the personal size, it was still functional for me, but still more portable for my work schedule. So having gone through this, I will say that while there is a risk of not really achieving true portability with the personal ring size, you can make it work. And I think, but there's some give and take, right? So the biggest change I saw with my personal ring size versus the half letter was just the size of the inserts. The space is significantly smaller in terms of the space you can write in. And that was one of the things I loved about the half letter, the roominess of the pages, right? There, for me, was plenty of space to write my notes and not feel cramped. You compare that to what you get in the personal size, and the boxes are smaller. The space for you to write your schedule is also smaller. It's just a smaller space. So that was one thing I really needed to get used to. But I really felt at this point of the year, I had to make it work. So one of the things that I have learned working in the personal size is that Cloth and Paper's undated daily agendas seem to work really well for me. And here's what I love about these undated daily agendas. For one, it helped me cut down on extra pages that would go unused on weekends or holidays because they were undated. So I, just filled in the dates that I needed to use it for and didn't have to think about all the unused paper and inserts that I wasn't using for weekends and holidays when I wasn't working. So that was great. That helped me cut down on the bulk. It reduced waste and, just controlled the planner bloat, as I like to refer to it. But again, using this daily insert also kept me from feeling too cramped. Just the way that it's designed, I'm not feeling forced to write in tiny, tiny handwriting and thus making my inserts unusable. So I made it work somehow, and I'm still in it. And I would say that same mentality regarding portability and space also applied to my work notebook. And I'll go through that. Next. We're going to come back to this, though. But let's talk about my work notebook system. So in 2024 and the beginning of 2025, I was working out of this notebook, which is, I think, an A5. It's got a hardcover, and it's not from any brand. Actually, I got this while I was on a work trip in New York City at the Blackstone headquarter office. They gave us all these neat little branded notebooks, and I thought, hey, I'll just use this. I'll use this for now. So I started using this. I started filling it up in 2024, and then I finished it in spring of 2025. Nothing special, just an average notebook. But I finished it up around the time that I was starting to travel for 2025. And it was good timing, but I had to make a decision. Do I stay in this bigger, more traditional notebook size, which, seemed to work well, or do I focus on portability? And at the end of the day, portability won out. So this right here is a Cloth and Paper CP Petite bound notebook. I don't believe it's on sale right now, but I made the decision to move to this. So you can see size-wise, there's a pretty significant difference. And that will affect two things. It'll affect the ease in packing this when you're traveling, but then it's also going to force you to write smaller. And for me, that's always a challenge. Having a smaller space to write things um, poses the risk for me of my notes getting really messy. But I did it. I did it. And I will have to say it worked out. I don't love it. I think I would prefer something this size, but again, it's just easier to pack this and to carry this around than this. That's just what it came down to me at the end of the day. I made it work. I made this work. And I think that's the important thing that I need to mention. So where does this all lead me to now? Well, needless to say, there were some very interesting lessons learned this year. As I look back on 2025, besides prioritizing portability, I see two main trends in my planning system and style, and I haven't covered those yet. The first thing I noticed is I realized that I needed regular planner refreshes. Now, taking size and portability out of the question, what does this mean? I mean, I found this means quarterly refreshes for my planner dashboards, dividers, and deco. And as I plan ahead for 2026, I think it means quarterly changes in my personal ring covers and agendas. Okay, this is a little embarrassing because it seems really excessive, but in 2026, I plan to have 4 different personal ring agendas or folios for each quarter because I've decided I'm going to stay in this size for work. It just, for now, is working well, and it's going to be another busy travel year. So I have decided first quarter, I'm going to move all my stuff into, sorry, it was upside down, this beautiful ash-colored cloth and paper personal rings folio. So this will carry me through January through March. And then second quarter, which will be April through June, I'm going to switch to a different style. I don't have the style that I want right now. I'm in search of a personal rings folio that is in the color pink or mauve and is in a croc style texture. That I would love to use for my second quarter folio. So I'm keeping my eye out for something like that. And then third quarter, I'm going to use this Filofax personal rings cover to get me through the summer months. And then in the fall, I'm going to return to what I'm in currently, and this is Cloth and Paper's Bodeaux folio in personal rings. And I feel this is going to be enough to keep me motivated and excited about planning. Things are not going to get stale for me. And the change, which I noticed I needed this year, I'm prepared for it now. I'm prepared for 2026. The other thing I learned about myself this year is that I actually kind of like color. I mean, I love neutrals, and I always will, but this year I fell hard for accent colors. So actually, you can see this progression in my content planner. You know, I started off very neutral with some silvers and grays. I warmed up a little bit as the year went on, but not too much, right? Still kind of in that neutral family zone. And then mid-year, I needed color. And, I experimented with some reds, some patterns, went into a blue phase. Now I'm kind of in a orangish fall phase, browns. I changed with the season, I guess. And I started to really embrace color. And I know that it's going to continue next year. So nothing against neutrals. I love neutrals. I will continue to use neutrals in many spreads. But this year in 2026, I'm not going to be afraid to use color. In fact, I'm going to embrace it because it made the time seem less stale, I guess. It just kept me motivated with my planner system, and it kept me from being bored. And so that was just a pleasant, surprising lesson I learned about myself this year. And I feel that I was no doubt influenced by a lot of you out there who are also finding beautiful ways to plan in color and plan in different styles and layouts. So thank you all for that inspiration. But that pretty much summarizes what worked, what didn't work, and what I learned about myself throughout 2025 and my planning system. And it's really given me a lot of insight as to how to prepare for 2026. So maybe this all sparked some reflection in some of you as you look back on your own journeys from 2025 and start planning for 2026. I feel if we aren't evolving as planners and humans, then we're just staying stuck, and that's no fun. And of course, there is much more to my 2026 planner system than what I've just hinted to so far. And I'll save that for a future video. But anyways, as always, thank you for watching, and if you don't mind, let me know in the comments something you learned about yourself as a planner person in 2025. I'd love to know what your journey has looked like. And until then, I'll see you all next time, everyone. Thanks again for joining.